Okay. I've never heard that like out loud. All right, so the meeting is being recorded. So if you don't feel comfortable having your face on screen, just feel free to turn your camera off. We're going to be sharing it on our website and social media platforms, and as well as sharing a direct link to everybody who participated today. Sorry, I should have mentioned that before. This is a good reminder. So yeah, I'd love to begin, honestly, with names. You know, there's Old Growth Press, which Cleo is your project, Write Magazine, Kelsey, Our Stories, Our Truths, Mo, one of the many projects that you're working on at the same time, and Color Code. I think that the act of naming and names in themselves hold so much, and I would love to hear the stories behind the names of these and how this was sort of a spark to begin. However, whoever would like to respond to that, I leave the floor to you.
I guess I'll just go first because you said Old Growth first. Old Growth Press is co-founded by me and my best friend Terrence Abrams. And I guess we were kind of looking to the legacy that is left by Old Growth Forest. Like, they have existed longer than us, our relatives, anything, and they will continue to resist despite everything, even in our current climate. And kind of the impact that that has on the environment and also the world, in that like they sustain so much growth. It was kind of like we had a hard time picking a name. We were just like, we want it to be like earthy, we like trees and stuff, but then like when we got Old Growth Fest, it kind of really clicked and made sense for us. But I think we were really going in like how sustainable an old growth forest is into creating new life from something that has always existed, especially because our mandate is to publish people of color, queers, like people on the margins. And I find like in mainstream publishing, it's so hard to find that work present, but it has also always been there. You just have to really like work to find it sometimes. So that was kind of the basis of that. Like we're not starting something new with what we were doing. We're looking back to something that has always existed and working from that to go forward to hopefully create something that someone else can take from and continue to build something and create something much bigger than what our small press is.
It just reaffirms this of a cycle, you know, like us. Next.
Hi friends, we're having some technical difficulties. We're gonna get Alexia back in just a moment. Just hold on. So sorry.
Got it. Hi, we're having technical difficulties. So sorry. I feel so bad. I don't know if it's Mercury retrograde or something, but like
going from 3 computers to 2 computers.
and now the internet's like, please stop giving us so much of this stuff. But apologies. I'm glad that the entire thing didn't actually close off. But Are you okay if I use them? Okay, perfect. All right, so after hearing everything that Cleo shared about old growth and how it's about cycles and like coming back to the earth and then regenerating and knowing that it's so much older than all of us and that it's going to be here so much longer than all of us, I think of Ripe magazine and the word ripe and Kelsey and like the notion of harvesting, right? And like what comes when the food is ripe and like whom do you share it with, and like that whole ritual of like gathering around. So I would love to know more about where that inspiration came from.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you are on mute.
Am I still muted?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm not supposed to be on mute, so I hope everyone can hear me.
It's all good. Oh, I got it. My volume was low. I swear we're professional, huh?
It's the internet.
What does professional mean anyway?
Exactly.
The internet does not like us today, too.
No.
So it's okay. So I'm gonna go here.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna go speaker, and then I'm gonna pin you.
Okay.
And then do this.
Thank you. Tech mom.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay, now yes.
Perfect. Alexia, everything you just said was so lovely and thoughtful, and I wish Ripe's naming had a better origin. But so in 2018, a friend of mine, Claire Vardy, reached out to me and asked if I wanted to make a zine with her. We're both very devoted to food. We love like recipe creation. We love talking about food. And we just didn't find any food writing that kind of explored food on a cultural level in the way that we wanted to read. So we decided to make a space where we could have like contributors create that content and share it with as many people as we can. We're still like we have like a very small print run, but it sells out every time, which is always like really heartwarming. But for the naming, we knew we wanted to tackle stories about like food insecurity, cultural assimilation through food. Our first issue is really devoted to ideas of like family, immigration, how food binds us to our cultures, and how sometimes we feel disconnected from our cultures if we don't know our ancestral recipes and things like that. So we knew we wanted to do that, and then we just started thinking of food-related words, and this is why we didn't have like the most thoughtful origin story, and we settled on Ripe because it had just like a zing to it, and like once we got to that word, I didn't want anything else. Like all of our other suggestions just didn't seem to fit. It was almost just like intuitive. Like when people ask us why we chose that name, I always just think it just felt right, like it fit. And every issue is devoted to very different topics, and Ripe somehow still seems to like work as like a blanket name to encompass everything.
Thank you. I love that. I think that in itself is the best origin story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sorry, I also wanted to say, I realized I sent you the wrong version of my bio. I've changed all of my bios to say X University. I no longer like refer, but I just wanted to mention that in case anyone like, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for catching that, and my bad for not catching it either. But yeah, just so everybody knows, it is now X University. Ongoing for sure. Thank you for clarifying. Jesjit or Mo, I don't know if either of you want to follow up. Mo, I mentioned Our Stories Are Truths just as one project. I know you're working on multiple initiatives at the same time. So feel free to talk about that, or if there's something else that.
Sure, yeah. So I have really not good internet, so if I'm cutting out, just let me know. So our stories are truths, not strudels. Started as my own little project through art therapy school. Everything that I was learning in art therapy school was I'm like, we've already been doing this. All of the stuff has already been done. Like it's like art as healing or art therapy is not new. So many different cultures around the world do art as healing or art as storytelling from the beginning of time. And I'm like, art, like I got frustrated. So I was like, well, what is this about? What do I want to create? And I'm like, well, what I do in my practice is about sharing my stories and sharing my truths from internally and putting them out there and seeing if there's connections. And I think Our Stories, Our Truths was birthed from that, but it also grew because I co-founded it with a colleague of mine named Shauna Howe, who's a Anishinaabe artist, and it quickly became about a gathering space for young folks, young Indigenous folks, to get together, create art, learn from knowledge keepers, storytellers, whoever we invited in. And it quickly became about everyone who was in the space, our stories and our truths, because it did originate from my story, my truth. And there's a collective experience within that as well. So I really wanted to highlight that. But since it's grown, so OSOT has been alive for 5 years, and it's shifted now. So and one cool thing I want to know is OSOT, if you say like OSOT, or it kind of sounds like grandmother in Oneida language, which is Oksut. That's how you say grandmother. So I was like, that's really cool. And I'm like, okay, OSOT, OSOT, like it's so connected. And so from there, we actually, this year, our final year of like, we ended up getting a grant, and we've been running this program since, and now it's Earth Sky Collective. So it goes Earth Sky Collective as a whole, and then underneath is the programming, which is Our Stories, Our Truths. So it's all about using art and creative things to share our stories and whatever we want to share. And it's like, I always worried about it being perceived as like extractive, like taking our stories and these are our truths, like, but it's never about that. It's only about sharing what feels right. So when we created zines and stuff, the youth had full decision on like what's included, and even like the layout, they got to design it and stuff. So yeah, that's a long story about the name, but it's forever evolving just as we do as humans. And yeah, that's it. You don't go.
That's so lovely, and thank you for sharing that the word is grandmother as well. I feel like that stuff is not a coincidence, you know. It's
right, and but it's like, it's not spelled the same, but the way that it sounds and the way that it comes out reminds me of that. So I constantly think about my grandmothers, like all the time. Yeah.
And like oral storytelling as well, which we're gonna get into as well, and like the connection with zines. It's just like all of that is so
It's cool.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mo. Thank you. And Jesjit, your name, color code. I was looking into I'm a sucker for etymology. I love looking at the like origins of words, and when color in Latin is like color, so like you can't really get a lot from that. It just reflects light. But code, I was looking at code and like codex, and how like codex is like a block of wood split into leaves, and it was like the first tablet, I guess, that was written on, and that's how they referred to it as like the first kind of book originally, where like written. So it just made me think of this. But yeah, I would love to know the story behind color code.
Well, I don't have like a very interesting or like a good story behind it. And I was like, when you had mentioned talking about this yesterday, I like looked back into my email, because I've been doing color code since like it was like ruminating at the end of 2010, and I got it started in 2011. So that's like a long time ago. It's not like I don't really haven't reflected a lot about naming it, because I look back in my emails about like at those days with like when I was like telling friends about it, like, oh, I'm starting a print shop, small press, and it I I was getting real wound up just looking back at those, like, 10-year-old messages and like the way I'm just like talking to people about this, but, and also my other ideas for names were like really make me cringe a lot, but it was like, and like initially, or I mean, it was kind of a nuts and bolts kind of name for like a printing service that, like, at the time I wanted to be like very not like not like personality free, but like to just be like the face, or like the like to be separate from myself, because up until that point I'd print for people, and I published some small zines and books, and I'd write just printed by Jesjit on them as like my credit or whatever. So I felt like this is like my professional identity in a way, and it like connects to what I do, which is like very graphic, colorful reproduction. Yeah, so it's maybe not like, I don't feel that it was a very thoughtful beginning, but over 10 years of doing this, I do feel very connected and proud of Color Code, and very attached to the name, because over this time we just have accumulated so many different experiences and projects, and working in relationships, working with people, all tied to this thing. And it's like it's a very feels like a very long-term project that will, whatever intention I might have at any point about like what we do, it morphs and changes, and I don't know. That's kind of what I have off the top of my head.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. It just goes to show also like what it means to create something larger than yourself, and to like grow into a name as well, right? Like even without knowing what to expect and how it's going to turn out. And a decade is such a long time to like even just keep something independent going, like in the city, and like also just like in general. So just hearing you speak about this journey of like going back into your emails and like being like, wow, like who was I then, and like what were my dreams and my goals then, and like it gives me goosebumps, because I just think that it's an ongoing, like it's not about a final product, it's so much about the process. And I feel like the four of you really embody that so much in your practices, and it's super super affirming and inspiring to witness, really. And you mentioned as well relations, and I was reflecting on this yesterday. We have an artist in residency right now at Xpace, and one of our artists was talking about their artwork. They work with weaving and textiles and sculpture, and they were saying that they don't really see their art pieces as babies. When you're like starting a new project, you're like, oh, it's my baby, it's my baby. You literally have a baby, so you understand what I'm saying. But like this artist was saying, oh, I don't see my artworks as babies. I see them as kin. I see them as like my relations, and we're accompanying each other, we're working alongside each other. And just hearing them say that was so like, oh, like I don't know. I just felt the need to share that, because I resonated with what you just did and what the four of you shared. And I feel like when I read zines and books and like other similar art forms, like I can't help but to see them really as portals, like as vessels that like are channeling something that is larger than you, that is coming through you, be it emotion, like spirit, story. And I think of how these vessels are carriers, and how like reciprocity plays such a huge role within this, and the exchange. So I guess on that note, I have like my following question. I kind of have like individual ones for each of you, because I feel like your practices are so different but connected. But I guess, Mo, I can begin with you because your practice is ever shifting and you dance between so many mediums. Like even just reading your bio, I was like, is there something they don't do? But yeah, like collage, beading, textiles, you know, like visual art journals. I'd love to know like what draws you to zines particularly, and how zine making, journaling accompanies your other practices or differs from your other practices.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So first, I just want to speak to like my vast amount of interests. I am a Gemini. So I don't like to stay on one thing for too long. I shift a lot. And that's also part of my neurodivergencies, is I need to constantly be like embedded into different things, because that's how I continually grow and learn. And it just interests me, like the dynamics of doing this and then shifting to that is just like, it just nourishes me. So yeah, I wanted to speak to that because it's really important to my practice. But also, can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. I'd love to know what draws you to zines, and how the zine making that you do or the journaling that you do accompanies your other practices. Like, how do they interconnect?
Yeah.
How do
Okay,
they?
cool. Got it. Okay, so the first thing is that I've been art journaling for probably 10 years. One of my biggest inspirations for art journaling is Guy Denota de Moulin-Bush, who's a Mohawk artist, and they do a lot of art journaling too. They have like stacks and stacks of books, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, it's a whole archive of a journey, right? So I've been working on that, and I actually have this book here. I made like a little like pocket for it to keep it protected and safe. But I just made this through like Blurb, but it's called The Gift of Transformation. And it's all of my art therapy journey. So all different pieces that I made. So this started it. And then I've been art journaling ever since. And that also took me to zine making because of accessibility. One of the biggest things that I love about making zines is that they're little bundles of things that you can carry with you, that I can reach for when I need certain things. And I love how little they are, how much you can put in one little thing. And sometimes the text is minimal but impactful. And sometimes my neurodivergencies affect my ability to read. And reading like a big book isn't possible for me sometimes. So to have a zine where there's images and small phrases, poetry, whatever is going to be included in there, it's more accessible for me to process, to take in. I am a visual storyteller, and I also communicate visually. So that helps me being able to express myself, but also to understand what's being expressed to me. It really is like a really helpful tool. And it's like, it's just so beautiful. Like, I just have so much love and passion for these little books that I don't know. I'm super passionate about it. And I'm new to the zine world. Like, I didn't even know that zines, like personal zines, existed until I did that workshop with, is it Pre?
Wow.
Yeah. So I learned about zines. I'm like, that's what I make, is personal zines. And
you want to share more about what personal zines are? So
I would love to. If anyone wants to share. Like, I don't know much about, like, I'm so new, and I just kind of been doing this on my own, and with very little like research into the zine world. So I've been learning a lot, like, through these workshops that you've been doing. But yeah, zines is a thing. It's cool.
Oh, thank you. I love that. And I love that like how what you mentioned about accessibility, you know, like being able to carry it around, being able to like language, you know, like so much of it, like even just the fact that it's why zines, it's what zines are essentially. And
yeah, I love it so much.
It's so special, so special. Thank you. I don't know if anyone else, I have another question for Kelsey, which is related, but on like a different kind of term. So I don't know if like Cleo, you want to like add to that? Because I know that you, as well as a practicing artist, as a curator, you kind of navigate between all of these different worlds.
Well, curating, I've only curated that Xpace show, which was an accident. Because I hadn't, when I did the pitch to work with the zine archive at Xpace, I was just like, oh, I'll take the back room, I'll do something small. And then I think it was Philip who was like, you can have the main space. I was like, oh shit, that's a lot of space. But it turned out to be like this very wonderful experience that was like, the thing I think I love about zines is that there is always something to learn and discover and find through them. Like every archive is different. Like even your own zine library is an archive to things that you love. And like I teach zine making, and I kind of get stuck in a place where, because I teach like just a simple 1-page zine, like how to make that, because I feel like it's the easiest place to start. And I kind of get to the point like, no one needs to know this, but it's always so surprising and exciting when people do learn how to make a 1-page zine and what they create out of it. Like it's one of the most fulfilling things that I get out of zine making. I think it's kind of funny because Jesjit was talking about how like old color code is, and like one of my first zines, I didn't make a 1-page zine first. I was like, I'm gonna make a cool risograph zine, which was just like black. It wasn't even using like color, which you should use risograph for, but like my first published comic zine was with color code. So that ties that all together. And I think like without that experience, without like working with color code to like learn how to print a publication and so forth, I wouldn't be making zines how I do now. And I also went to the publication program at OCAD, which helped because I got to take a class that was nano publishing. So we got to really get immersed into like the activist backgrounds of zine publishing, and like we were encouraged to make a zine for our final project, and that ties back to Mo with perzines, because I made my first perzine there, which was Kingston is for Lesbians, which was like me just kind of like purging childhood trauma from Kingston, Ontario, which I am leaving today, which is weird, but there was just something so rewarding to be able to find a medium that tied personal writing with image, like illustration, because I've always been an illustrator first. It's always something I've been working towards, but I don't see myself being an illustrator in a commercial space kind of way. So being able to have a way where I can take my illustrations and put them into a book, which has also always been so important to my practice and me as a person, because I'm an only child. I grew up with books as my friends, stories, I love them. So it just kind of just fit perfectly to have this method. And then because publishing is like this weird, evil kind of corporation type thing where there's like 20 people who have to like look at your work, and if you don't fit into the mainstream, like you better forget about it. Like being able to have the skills and tools to like just do it yourself or help other people do that is so rewarding. I don't even know what the question was, but I love zine making, and that's kind of like a little bit of my history and stuff about zines and how it kind of ties together. And yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing, Lowell, at the accidental curation. Which is
it was a blessing. It was a blessing. I think because so COVID, I did that exhibition and COVID was kind of still happening. We were kind of at a point where like maybe things are getting better. So we had that little nice grace period, but I was also like going off of not like I was finishing my 4th year at OCAD, so I had been working on trying to get together a cool thesis printmaking thing, and then everything was canceled, so I was like, I'll never make art again. But then I had this opportunity, so it really helped make me inspired and feel like I could make work again. So I'm so grateful.
We were so grateful to have you in the space, and it was the first time that someone had ever even like thought of going back into that, and so much of I find like in the arts, like we speak about this all the time with Natalie and Phil about like institutional amnesia, and how like there's no, and like both, I feel like the 4 of you mentioned this idea of like, this is not the first time that we've done this, like who has done this in the past, and like how can we like honor the past and be held accountable to the past in order to like move forward. It's all super connected. And the fact that you came in and looked through our zine library and like responded to those works with like Kaya and Clara and like Forrest was just so special. And to have that, as you say, grace period where like people could actually, that was the first show that we were able to like have in person after like 8 months or something. So it was really lovely. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that love of zines through your history as well. It's really nice to hear. And you mentioned something that is actually related to the next question that I have, which is lol, the evils of journalism. But this question is directed to all of you, but to Kelsey especially, I'd love to know your thoughts, like as a full-time writer. Like I'm a writer myself, and I'm still learning how to like freelance and all of that, but I would love to know, like, how do you navigate writing for an institution versus founding and writing for your own publication, you know, that you do with friends and that you kind of do in your own way? Would love to know your thoughts.
I love this question because, yeah, I was freelancing from 2017 until September 2020 when I got my first full-time writing job. And you have to, or at least especially in journalism, you have to be malleable and fit your writing to fit the voice of the publications you're writing for. It's a lot of forfeiting control. I can't tell you the number of times I've written something that I really loved and the whole section is just obliterated, taken out, changed around because it just doesn't fit the voice, or like the editor doesn't think their audience will care, and you kind of just have to go with it because you need to get paid and you need to live. And that's kind of like the bleak aspect of freelancing and working like in any kind of media. But the reason why I was so excited to start Ripe in 2018 was it was the first time I would have a sense of like actual control over content that was going into something that my friends and I were like pouring our hearts into. Which I sometimes get to do in the work that I do for like major publications or even like smaller publications, but there's always like people I have to answer to. There's always the editor, and then there's their boss, and then the boss, and then there's the people who are paying for everything. So that's like whoever the owner is, and advertisers. And that's one reason why with Ripe, we didn't really care about making money. We just wanted to do something we loved and like not go bang, like not be in the red after we printed it and like sold some copies. But I told everyone from the beginning, I was like, because a lot of the people on the Ripe team also went to X University's journalism program with me, so we like kind of know very well how magazines typically function. And like they're entirely dependent on advertising to like run, which obviously has a huge effect on the content that the public gets to read and that gets commissioned and all of those things. And I was like, I don't want a single ad in any issue that we ever put out, which was really exciting because on our second issue, which I have with me, that meant that we didn't have to have a back page ad, which is a really common thing in magazines. So we got to have like a cover that's just like a wraparound cover.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it like that well, but it's an illustration / painting done by Toronto artist Kersha Wright, and I've loved her work for so long. And I was so happy to be able to like commission that and like just have a cover that's just like art. There's no words other than the title of our zine and then the words issue 2. And it was just like to be able to do that feels super empowering to me, because the other aspect of the work that I do, that would never happen. Like I can't. But yeah, working for big bad media has it does have perks in the sense that when I went into this, I was very well versed in creating different kinds of like reported features, personal essays, poetry, recipes, like all of these different kinds of written content. And I had the skill set to basically be an editor-in-chief, because a lot of Ripe is written by contributors. I just get the honor of editing everything and like spending time with them to like blossom their pieces into like the pinnacle of what they can be. And that's a really reaffirming and nourishing sort of ritual for me, which I don't get to do. I'm a writer, so I'm usually the one who's like submitting things and like getting feedback. But to be on the other end of that and to see what it feels like to like help people grow their ideas into something that's fully formed is so just like, it just makes me so tingly inside. And yeah, like that really is what Ripe fulfills within like my own sort of, I guess, practice. It creates a space for me to get to do work that's always fulfilling. Like if I'm up until 5 a.m. to get it done, send it to the printer, I don't care. I'm like so thrilled to do it. But when I'm pulling an all-nighter to meet a deadline on a feature for like a magazine, I'm usually like really grumpy the next day.
Yeah, that's the thing with the freelancing, right? Just like having like so many multiple responsibilities and hats, and you can't afford to not be present in either of them. So just this like idea of like, I need to be 100% present in 100% of everything I do. Woof. I feel that, but I love what you share about like finding the balance within those two things, and how you make it work for the what works for you, how individual that is, and how collective that is as well. Like something that I obviously is something that we witness, right? In independent publishing and any sort of independent practice, be it artist-run centers or like opening a space or collectives, like how much the togetherness is the real like life force of that, you know, like, and how much that resists the individuality that this like art scene and journalism scene keeps like throwing onto us, the hierarchy of like, I know more than you because I've studied alone in this for like 6 years, not to take away like the fact of like, yeah, you're educated in X topic, but I keep seeing this, and it gives me so much joy. And like what you share about like, oh, it gives me like this tingly feeling to like be able to like read other people's proposals and like support them in like having it out there in the way that they want to do it is sacred, really. It's so important. And if everybody approached it with this mentality, like, whoo, you know. And I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, the three of you, for sharing. And I have like in relation to this, like I have a question for you, for Jesjit, because aside, like if we return to the notion of like zine crafting as vessels, right? Like we're like carrying this knowledge, we're channeling, we're sharing information, we're sharing resources. I think of like the importance of tools within that, like the tools in order to like create these vessels. And I guess in the zine world, you have like paper making, you know, you have printing, assembling, sewing, like so many different processes that are like hand, you know, like that you do with your hands. And I know that these are some, like printing is a service that Color Code offers, as well as distribution with Zine Dream. And these are all things that you've been offering for like over a decade. So I would love to share, like, I would love for you to share like how Zine Dream is connected to Color Code, and like how that sort of relationship has shifted or morphed over the years, because you especially say artist friendly, and I think that's an important thing to highlight. You're like, we are an artist friendly print service. So yes, I can repeat the question. I don't know if that was a clear question.
So I started Zine Dream with a friend, another artist, Laura McCoy, in 2007. And at that time there's been like independent DIY zine culture for forever in Toronto, like in this like community, but it was like, it felt at that time to us that there was CanZine, and then there wasn't really anything else as a venue to for like art, for the artists and self-publishers to share their work. So that's why we started it, was to, and that's like that feels like the seed of like why, what or I don't know how to put this, but like how getting having the opportunity to be with other artists and publishers and to share our work, that is really what brings me to zines and self-publishing, is because it is a medium that has relatively low barrier to entry. It can be whatever you make of it, in the sense that it doesn't have to be an expensive glossy book, or it can be any shape or form. And so with the early years of Zine Dream, there was we wanted to accommodate, I felt strongly about just accommodating everyone that came to us. So the first 4 or 5 years that we did it, it was at the Transac on Bloor Street. It was anyone that asked for a table would get, we'd have space for them. There was no kind of curation or moderating the entry. We just have it got to the point that we were really cramming the place, but and then since at a certain point we moved to a different venue, and it's changed a lot because there's a lot more demand. And I think that's that was an exciting thing to see over the years, to see how many more and more people were involved in self-publishing. Yeah, I don't know, I have just always had this attraction to self-publishing because of that reason, that it could be for everyone. And just personally, I have almost my whole life, my whole adult life and my teenage life, peripherally had some connection to printing or something involved, something that I'm at the studio even these days and we're assembling books, and I have the same, I had a paper route when I was a little kid, and I was putting newspapers together, and I'm doing the same thing kind of now, putting books together. Mm-hmm. So it's this has kind of felt like a steady through line in my life, is a connection to this tactility of handling paper and using printers and equipment to put to create publications and books and things like that. So they were separate. Color Code is separate from Zine Dream in a lot of, and it is a separate thing. But it is also I don't know, they're both very central to my life. Yeah, I'm not sure if I really addressed or got to what you're asking, but yeah.
You did. You totally did. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And hearing that, I think everything that you say, that the zines are something that, going back to what Mo was talking about, accessibility, everybody can make one, everybody should make one, and these spaces should be and are for everybody. And how you talk about Zine Dream being everybody come get a table and then we're crammed, so you're okay, instead of starting to curate it, we're gonna go to a bigger venue, and the power in that, I think, is so special. And how that goes hand in hand with both offering services for making the books, but also enabling spaces where people can share and exchange the work that they've done is so important, I think, and super cool that it's in the city. These are places that you can go to. So thank you for sharing. I have one more question for all of you, and then maybe we can take a 15-minute break, if that's okay for everybody. Get some water, have a smoke. Perfect. A lot of the things that we've been discussing in relation to exchange, you know, like gathering, community, collectively creating, so much of this has to do with skill sharing, you know, and like the passing on of knowledge. And like we witness this in all of your projects, you know, like we have like Color Code has the Risograph workshops that you offer. Cleo, you were doing consistently like self-publishing, zine making workshops. Kelsey, you share recipes with Ripe Magazine. You curate like music playlists as a way of like having people further connect with like all of the articles and stuff that you're sharing and that you're writing. And Mo, you have like everything from like quill work to like salve making, syllabics workshops, you know, like medicine walks. So I just wanted to throw this question out to the four of you. I would love to know like what role does this like skill and knowledge exchange really mean to you in regards to your practice? So I loaded question, but I leave the floor open to you, to whomever wants to share.
I can jump in.
Go ahead.
It's everything. Like it's literally everything. With Our Stories, Our Truths as my own practice, like I have been a huge advocate and believer of making sure that what I know doesn't stay within me. You know what I mean? Like I have so many young folks in my life that, and I know so much because I get really hyper fixated on learning or knowing something. Or if I don't know, then I can invite somebody in that can share that. But it's everything, because the more that we can share, the more that we can build together, the more we can continue on the work that we're doing. And that exchange is crucial for the creative process, because like there's no sense in like holding something when it can be shared. You know, like anything, like I truly believe like young folks like that I work with, I'm like, I'm around, like if you need something, let me know. I can, if I don't know, then I can connect you with somebody that does know. And that's what Our Stories, Our Truth is really about, is like making sure that information that folks know is shared, and people are able to create with that knowledge, but also remembering that the knowledge is within us as well, and that we can access that, right? Like we have our ancestors helping us like all the time to call on that information, or like the things that we need to know and move through. And I'm always so like, my heart is always so full when I'm working with folks, and I'm learning too. Like we're all always learning together. And I think that there's a lot of empowerment within that, like individually, but also as a community. Yeah, it's everything. That's it.
Yes.
It needs to continue, and that passing on, like the oral storytelling or tradition, or even visual storytelling, like all of that is a part of it. And I feel like my practice couldn't exist without, you know, like they're really kind of like, you know, siblings or something.
I love this so much. Thank you. Cleo.
I forgot the question, I think. But I think in terms of my practice, I think it goes back to accessibility and challenging this notion from the art scene that like who can make art and what is good art. Like as an illustrator, I'm not like, I'm a good illustrator, but like I'm not the best to my standards. But it's like those standards are something that I created in my own head and were created from society around me. And I feel like so many people will tell me like, oh, I wish I could draw on those things. I'm like, but you can, like you can draw, and kind of really trying to dismantle this idea that you have to be a certain type of person to be able to make artwork. And what is good artwork? Like as long as you can create something and feel something from that, that is what matters. And the more that we can kind of have that in the world, the more beautiful place we have, and the more community we can build through that. And like obviously there's so many things to like unlearn that we grow up with, but I think kind of growing up being and not seeing myself ever represented, it's like I have to be the representation for myself and for others, and I need to empower others to know that they can also be that for themselves. So kind of definitely just challenging all these ideas that are kind of built in accessibility and basically white supremacy, that kind of tell people like me especially, that like they're not going to be able to make it in this type of like art community when that's like not true. So I feel like the harder I work at putting myself out there and making that work, the easier it is for someone else down the line to then do that themselves.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And like what you say about like disrupting those standards and like who sets those standards and setting them for yourself. Because yeah, and like even just at the beginning, like when we were like, oh my god, professionalism, and like Mo was like, what is professionalism? Like this is that, you know, 100%. Thank you. Kelsey, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
For sure. I don't know if this is necessarily like skill sharing, but one of my favorite aspects of working on RIPE has been the ability to pay our contributors. I strongly believe, especially because I did a lot of exploitive writing for free when I was young and still in school and like needed to build my portfolio, and I didn't realize until later that I should have been paid for all of that work. When we started RIPE, I was like, I don't care if we make a profit. We're funding it with our own money. What I care about is that every single person whose name is, you know, like in the bylines, in all of the content, like they need to be paid, they need to be compensated for their work. And to be able to do that is really fulfilling, especially because we work with a lot of first-time writers or emerging writers, or people who might not even call themselves a writer, but they have a cool idea about, you know, an ode to their grandmother's cooking that they want to write, or they want to put together a recipe that blends like their Palestinian and Italian heritage together. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to commission that. And I'd love the fact that I'm able to pay you for that time and like the part of yourself that you're pouring into this work. So I feel like it's more like championing people and just having a space where I can do that.
Oh, thank you for that. 100%. 100%. Like compensation, financial compensation, on top of all the other forms of compensation that you receive when like doing this work and like working through these practices is so important. And as you mentioned, for like emerging artists, or like even someone who like perhaps wouldn't consider themselves a writer, like where does that even come from, you know? Like the people who usually say, oh, I don't consider myself an artist, are people who have been making art for like 10 years, you know? So I hear you. That's I love all of the different forms that this knowledge sharing and also enabling can take place. I think it's really, really cool. So thank you all for sharing. So inspiring. Okay, it is 3:15 p.m. How about we take 10 minutes, 15 minutes? What is everybody feeling? 10, 15 minute break, if there's preference. 12 to balance it out in the middle.
12 and a half.
5-minute break. So how about we come back at 3, let's say 3:30. So please, yeah, feel free to turn your camera off, take whatever break you need. We're gonna be here. I need to plug this computer in because it's running out of battery. So if you need anything, just pop it in the chat, and see you at 3:30. All right, so it's 3:28, but I thought that we could slowly return at your time. I've also realized here that my name says Natalie King because I'm on Nat's computer, so I'm just gonna switch it out real quick. And thank you everybody for staying. It's really lovely. I recognize some names. And I wish that we could be doing this in person. Who knows what the future holds, but hopefully at some point we'll be able to gather again and do these sort of talks and conversations on site at Xpace. Hi, Jesjit. Okay, so while we're waiting actually for Kelsey, Mo, and Cleo to come back, I guess I can share that like kind of where we're at with Xpace right now. Hello. So right now we are we're doing our annual summer artist residency, and we have a couple of people in the space that are working on some really cool exhibitions, and they're going to be launched on September 17th officially. We're not going to be doing an opening reception, but we will have gallery appointments. So we are open again to the public as of September 17th. So please, if you have the capacity to come by, we would love to have you. Really excited for this next round of exhibitions. We have some really talented, brilliant artists. So I guess I just share that right now. So hi everybody, welcome back. I think we can jump back into it. I actually have two more kind of questions for all of you. They're kind of casual. I kind of made some notes, like hearing to everybody's conversation in the past hour or so. And then we can kind of leave it open for Q&A from everybody else. And if there's anything that you would like to show or share in particular with everybody, you can do so in this moment. And we're probably going to be wrapping up a little bit earlier. So instead of ending at 5, we'll probably end around 4-ish. So just an FYI, you never know, maybe we ramble and suddenly it's 5 p.m. But like just to keep everybody in the loop. But yeah, so I made, I wrote down, these are my questions, and I wrote down the word, listening to everything that you four were sharing, I wrote down the word sustainability and land, and I circled it. So I'm coming up with a question in the moment, but when I think of like zines as a craft and like how much of your hands are involved in it and how much of the elements is involved in it, like you're working with like paper, right? Like you're upcycling materials when you're collaging, you're kind of like really reusing things that you already have at your disposal instead of like discarding it and like throwing it out, like you're giving them new life. And I think of that in relation to food justice, right? And everything that like RIPE is sharing and like talking about. So I guess my question to you, which I kind of leave open to whomever wants to talk about it, is how, like, what role sustainability plays and like how like the land informs your practice as an artist, as a creator, as a writer. So I leave it open. Also loaded question. We have loaded questions.
I guess I could start with how for OGP Old Growth Press we try to use like recycled paper in our print runs. So we try to do that as like just to kind of make our run a little bit more environmentally conscious, because a book equals paper, which equals a tree, and a lot of waste can be produced in that. I think in terms of like the land in relation to myself as an artist, I think like would not be able to be an artist without the land. Like the land is what kind of informs everything. Like your environment does that no matter what. I've always loved a good tree. So for a long time, like a lot of my illustrative work was very like tree heavy and tree based. It hasn't been for a while, but I also haven't been drawing as much lately. So, but yeah, I feel like nature is in all things. You can't escape it. Why would you want to? And then kind of just like trying to fold that in to ways that you create work that do not harm the environment. For example, like NFTs now and stuff, like how fucked up that is, and the detriment that is. And I think about risograph printing too, and how like it uses soy-based ink, which is a lot more like it's a better form of ink for printing. Well, not necessarily for printing, but like environmentally, it is a better ink to be printing with. Which maybe just you could talk about it.
Yeah, it's if you're not familiar with it, it's Risograph. It is like an environmentally friendly printing press in that it doesn't the way like a digital printer. It consumes a lot of power, like a lot of electricity. The Riso is like a low power, no emission printer, and it uses these kind of vegetable oil, or like they used to be soy based. They are now rice based inks. Yeah, so it's like it has been for since the 80s, basically, this kind of like environmentally friendly, like lo-fi printing technique that just probably in the last 10 years or 10 to 15 years, artists and designers and self-publishers have like discovered, and it's kind of had a resurgence, but it actually has just been a printing process that has been used by like the school boards, you know, like the like regional school boards and like small like kind of business printing, but it's like it has a short history now of like art and art printing, zine printing, etc. But that's the in the 80s that was the attraction or like the whatever like way they advertised it as, like, you know, environmentally friendly. Yeah.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know that actually. So that's actually really, really cool. For some reason, I have this like bias in my brain that like colorful ink is bad for the environment. But then you look back at like how like ink has been made for ages, and it's all like plants, right? Like it's like turmeric, you know, or like beets, or like the original like paints. It was all made with like harvesting like with the plants and like flora and fauna that you had around you. So I caught myself in that like thing like almost as soon as I said it. I was like, oh wait, I did know this. Thank you for sharing. Kelsey, I saw that you wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry. Sometimes I forget when I'm in these that I'm on video the whole time, and I'll like talk to myself or do things with my hands, and then I remember that. So at Ripe, we're still thinking of ways to be better sustainable. For our second issue, we always have like a very like tight print run of like 100 or less copies. And we got a lot of interest in people who wanted to read it, but like couldn't because they sold out. And we decided instead of printing more, we would just make in like PDF, like you can buy a digital version instead, which the content is still incredible. Everything's laid out the same way. So it's just like a great option that's like much more environmentally friendly, obviously. I also personally have had like a love affair with print media since I was very young. I grew up in a house full of books and magazines. So the tactile element of it, I'm very like connected to. So I'm going through my own personal reckoning with like, maybe you don't need to buy every single specialty magazine, and you don't need to order this thing from Australia, like maybe. So I'm trying to get better at that in my personal life, because I love collecting things. I like having like a physical archive, that I can go to, like roll off my bed, go to my bookshelf and like hold something. But it's just like, I mean, the way that the future is going, like I don't think that is sustainable. So I'm learning to detach from that attachment I have with print media. And then in the long term, or like I guess thinking more generally about sustainability with Ripe, we've been thinking about the content, or every issue has like a theme. The last one was food justice, and that was like really integral and important to us. And through that, we've gotten to do some work with like Food Share Toronto, which is a food justice organization. So now we're thinking of ways of kind of extending beyond the zine and creating networks or connections with like other organizations working like on the ground or doing like tangible work that we can support, or you know, like maybe chronicle or write about. Yes, that is my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, expanding, or like it's not even it's an expansion, because you're like, what we exist within this, and like how am I integrating like all of the organizations and communities that are, and community members that are like leading everything that we're speaking about. I love that. I love that. At Xpace too, we've been having a lot of we've been thinking a lot about like sustainability and how it shows up here, because like we have papers on papers, like it's just printing everything, you know. And the building we rent from, like the landlord actually does not allow recycling. Like literally everything goes in the garbage. So we've been really thinking, okay, like now that we don't have access to the system, like what can we do to like avoid as much waste as possible. So we have like Tupperwares for food, you know, or like that type of stuff. I started collecting the paper from the paper shredder. I've never made paper and I really want to make paper, so I'm just gonna put it all like in a bag. Hopefully somebody comes and like teaches everybody how to make paper. But yeah, it's definitely an ongoing conversation that can show up in so many different ways, and there's so much that can be done about it, like depending on like your capacity and where you are and like what you're doing. So it's really cool to hear about like how you, Kelsey, and like Jesjit and Cleo are kind of integrating that into your practices. Mo, I saw you writing.
Yeah, I was taking notes. This is a huge thing, and I'm gonna start like by touching on my personal practice. So one of the things that I absolutely love doing is peeling paint off of pallets. It's so satisfying, and I get to pick, and it's just so good. So over time, like when I was first picking those pieces off, I'm like, they're so cool, they're so beautiful, it's like it's our own work of art. And then like typically that stuff would be thrown out, and then I'm like, I can't bring myself to throw this out, like what am I going to do with this? So I started collecting them, and I'm a collector. I collect like little random things like all the time, because I'm like, I can use this for something. Or like even in my art journal, like I'll have like random bits of paper that I'll just like keep because I'll use them eventually. And yeah, so I'm gonna actually share this with you. This is my paintball.
Oh my god, this is so cool.
So this is my friend. This is layers and layers from my palette. So I've been taking them off, and I'm actually just putting them around, so it just keeps building and building. This was inspired by a grade 5 that I worked with a few years ago, and I had one of these. It was way smaller, probably like 1/3 the size, and it was just sitting on my little painting area. And this kid picked it up and was like, "Can I have this?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." I'm like, "You can totally have that." And then they were like throwing it around and like squeezing it, and they're like, "It's my stress ball." And I'm like, "You are so cool." So I'm like, this is my stress ball now. So it's like even talking about sustainability in terms of like this type of stuff, but also like sustainability within ourselves and the energy that we have. Like going to the land is like crucial for my practice. So like being there and like letting it charge me and then going back into my process, I think also reminds me of this. One thing which is very like part of, you know, like harvesting and being on the land when we do medicine walks, like, of course, like that's part of the dish with one spoon, only take what you need, right? So it's just being mindful of like, okay, so we're making salves. How much medicines do we need to make that? We're not going to pick more than we need. Or even like talking about muralism. So that's a very toxic practice with spray paints, all the fumes and stuff. So looking at different ways of doing that in terms of, there's spray paint that's made out of sugar.
Whoa.
Yeah, so like I haven't used it yet, but that's like I keep like I want to move towards that. So right now I have tons of like spray paints and paints that I have collected over the years that I'm just using and trying to get rid of, so then I can flip my practice back to, you know, things that come from the land. But also, did you know, I'm working on a mural right now with Jackie Cormy, and so what we're doing is we're actually coating the mural, so not with this like toxic anti-graffiti stuff, but it's actually called Loom Active, which turns like whatever is hitting it, like the UV rays, all that stuff, it actually turns that stuff into oxygen. So it becomes like it's this whole new way of like preserving the painting while it's not being toxic and continuing putting those fumes into the earth, but it's like actually helping the environment because it's adding oxygen. So it's things like that I'm constantly, I didn't know about this. And then now I'm on this project with Jax, and then I learned about this. I'm like, okay, so when I do murals from now on, I'm going to request this type of varnish, because it's like so much better and it's not doing as much damage. And so like we're always kind of thinking about new and different ways that we can create. And I love like the idea of being digital. Like we have like our zines for OSOT, but we're actually going to be, we have like a very small number. We don't overprint, and then we will have them digitally. So there's always like creative ways that you can make it safer, and just like, yeah, not only sustainability with materials and stuff that you're using, but also with the energy that you put into your work and that you carry through, and like how can you recharge yourself. And that comes from the land a lot, and you know, our helpers a lot. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love all of this. I'm going to ask you the name of this magic light oxygen alchemizer wall thing after. That's so cool. And it just, yeah, it just goes to show there's like so much out there that like we're learning and like relearning to like protect ourselves and protect the land. And Loom Active. Okay, sweet. Thank you. I just had a thought. I'm not going to say it all loud. I was like, it sounds like a digestive yogurt.
I mean, oxygen helps.
Anyway, thank you so much for sharing that. And on the topic of sustainability and what you mentioned, Mo, about like personal sustainability, that's kind of the last question that I have for all of you, is how, it's not even a how do you recharge, or because, you know, like, but it's I would just, if you want to share anything on like what, and personally how you've found slowness in your practice and like sustainability in your, like, not even just in the arts, but just like, I guess, in your life. Because I find, especially now, like these are conversations that I'm having literally every day with like my friends, with my family, being like, are you resting? Did you drink water? Have you had food? Can you take a day off? You know, like what can I do to help you like be able to be in that space? So I would love to know your thoughts on that, just because I feel like the more that we share it, you know, you never know. So yes, last loaded question of the day on my end.
I would love to hear from everyone else because I'm very bad at this. My friends always yell at me for not sleeping enough and overworking myself and taking on too many responsibilities because I have the inability to say no. So I'm, even before the pandemic, I felt constantly burnt out, and I don't think that has stopped. I think I'm just like, I'm either running on autopilot or running on fumes. So I'd love advice.
I could say something because this is like kind of like a corner I turned, or like something that crystallized for me in the last few years, where I was very work obsessed or like possessed by working. And because printing, I mean, I went to school for printmaking. I went to OCAD, and then it was always like, it went from being my art practice to business to like my like generating my income, like to being work. So it went from like a passion, it's still a passion, but to being like a very necessity, or like a you know, like that aspect of my life. So I didn't have much outside of printing, and that was exciting and stressful, and like everything for several years of doing color code. And then I just like got to the point that like I needed a hobby, and I got some hobbies, and like it still I have had ups and downs of like detaching from work, and printing as work, and having like a life, like a home life, and like life separate from it. But that was like I just like picked up an activity that like was as far away from my art practice and like and my daily work practice, as far away from that as possible. That was still like something that like I had been interested in, but just had never made the time for. But then I also will say that like last year I got a dog. This year I had a baby. It's like it's changed a lot, but I remember very viscerally like the feeling of like being overburdened and like overworked, and like not knowing how to let go of it. But yeah, I don't know. I just started. I felt like that was like really helped me. Was like I just got into some physical activities that weren't those things, you know.
Totally. Thank you so much for sharing. That's something that like I'll just add on quickly. Like that's been my kind of one of my mechanisms too, to avoid burnout, because the work that I do is art administration, right? Like I run like Xpace alongside Nat and Phil, so it's very mental. It's very sedentary. I'm like sitting like 8 to 10 hours a day in front of a computer with a screen, spreadsheets, documents, logic, like mind. It's all here, and my body as a result is even if like it's all one, it's completely like disconnected, my relationship to my body. So like physical, and I'm not an exercise girl. Like I do not like, don't ask me to jog, don't ask me to go to the gym, because I'm like but going for walks, like Mo mentioned, like going to the land, like I live near Sunnyside luckily, so I go and I like literally just like sit with the water without anything, just to like be with the water, or like go to a park, lie down in the sun, kind of let myself get charged by the sun. Has been super helpful to like allowing myself to have nothing moments, and like not feel the need. I don't know about you, but I have this conversation so much with my friends where they're like, even in my nothing moments, I'm like, I want to listen to this podcast, I want to read this book, I want to inform myself on this, I want to be like sketching while I'm eating, and it's like nothing is the rest that will help you kind of do the other thing. So yeah, I agree with you, Jesjit, that is super important, the physical part, and getting as far away from your practice as possible, which is difficult. So definitely body is the most important.
I don't have any solutions. I think I am currently burnt out, and I think I've been burnt out for a very long time. So I think that I've been trying to like instill in myself is that like I have time to do things. Like I always feel like this need, like I have to get everything out as soon as possible. I have to do all these things and I have to do them now because they don't exist, and I need to make sure that I make them exist. But it's like, no, I don't. Like it's better if I take my time with it. Like I'm accidentally writing a novel, so I'm like trying to like, I want to get the novel done, but also like forcing myself isn't really doing anything. So I just like, I need it to be fun for me. And if I make it not fun, I don't want to do it. And I think because like Mo, I have so many different practices, and like I draw, I write, I book make, layout, whatever. Like I think also knowing that if I'm not drawing, it doesn't mean I'm not an artist anymore. Like it's always going to be there as something that I can go back to. And these like spaces, like I don't think I've drawn for like 3 months. So I think like when I go back to creating that visual work, I think that rest will be good for that skill. I think it'll be different. It'll be like coming home in a different way. So kind of like taking these, like, it is hard when you're an artist and it's like, this is what I use to make my money, but it is also something that gives me immense joy. So I think having a variety of personal art projects for yourself that you can kind of go back to, that you can go to for joy, that are not the ones that you're using for money, is something that is helpful. But I would love to not be burnt out anymore. I think having the space just do nothing in nature is very helpful, even if it's just like reading a book. Like I always forget, because sometimes I get like in that depressive state where you can't even leave your house, and then when I can force myself to like go into a green space and just sit under a tree, I was like, wow, nature really does just heal you, huh? So trying to create more time for that in your life, I think kind of gives you that balance. But it doesn't fix it, but it helps.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cleo. So true.
This is something that I'm always thinking of because I go through waves of burnout, not only with my own creative practice, but also with my neuroemergent brain. Like that happens a lot. It can be quite overwhelming and I just shut down. So it's really becomes life-sustaining to make sure that I take time, that I go slow, that I check in, that I listen. I've been like in counseling for so many years. I'm doing somatic experiencing for my own support, because for so long, like my head and my body weren't really getting along. They're just like not liking each other too much. So to do that work, to reconnect, I can actually now feel when I'm needing to pause, which prior I would just go and like almost like an autopilot. Like you just, it's survival mode. You just move, you go, you got to make the money, you got to do the things. And I can forget about myself. I can forget about my family. I can forget about everything. I can forget to eat, you know, like all of those things. So I think, yeah, just even on my, so I'm painting a mural today and I paused to come back here. Even on my drive home, I would normally put on music and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, I just need silence because like there was people around, there was talking, there was the lift, there was the sun, there were so many elements that I was experiencing that I'm like, okay, I just need nothing. So I like listened to that and I didn't have any sound on, and it was just what I needed to go from point A to point B. And yeah, so aside from that, it's like always having my medicines with me, like Sean, my co-facilitator slash colleague and friend, sibling, so many roles. We always have our medicines with us on site because we can pick up stuff, like you never know. So like if there's any like medicines or any tools that support you, bring them with you wherever you go, because then you can always have them there as supports. And again, like the land and water, like I'm so grateful that I have a dog because that forces me to go outside and go for walks. Otherwise, I don't think I would move my body. Like, so I really, the walks with my dog One are crucial for my well-being. And he also reminds me to pause because like, he's like, I gotta go outside, like, let me outside. And that reminds me like, okay, I gotta pause, take care of my baby, and then I can come back to what I was doing. And or even like setting timers for different things. Like I usually like to go with the flow, but sometimes I can get really into it and then I forget to check in with myself. So like whatever time frame works, like that's been helpful. And art journaling. So art journaling is like part of my art practice, but it's more for me. Like it's more for me to be like, I'm pissed off today and I need to put it into this page. And then it just makes me feel better and I can let go. Even what you were saying, Cleo, is like that balance of like the fun things for ourselves, but also the stuff that we need to do to make a living and to survive. It's a really hard balance and I'm still trying to figure it out. But it's a journey, and I really appreciate what everyone has shared because I'm gonna borrow a couple of those for myself.
I wanted to speak to the art journaling thing because I'm like so bad that I had to create an art project to force myself to art journal so I could like get stuff out of me. So I'm like, what if I monetize this so people buy a one-of-a-kind book and I just art journal in it and then they get a one-of-a-kind zine? And I'm like, okay, we can do this project, but actually we're gonna have to like carry this into our everyday life because you really need a place to put things down. And I think like it does not have to be for me. I have a Leo moon. I'm a Libra. I'm a Gemini as well. So like I also like pay attention to me or I will die. So like that's why I like kind of like sharing it. And I kind of like gain for like just like putting it out there is very
that's
helpful
nourishing too, right? Like it becomes nourishing
absolutely.
that way. Because
like if someone sees what you put out and like they interact with that, I also gain something from that, like helping. So art journaling has been very helpful for me to have a place to just kind of put thoughts down, even if they're stupid.
I know.
Like it doesn't matter. Like as long as they're out there, there's something very freeing about that.
I agree.
Yeah, all of this. And like as a writer, I find that, I don't know, Kelsey, I would love to know your thoughts, but I find that especially hard because you're like, oh, when is it writing for myself? When is it writing for the other institution? When is it writing for like my project? When is it just personal? Like,
oh my god, this reminds me of an interview I did in June. I did a roundup of like 10 emerging artists that from Toronto, like the GTA, that I honestly just chose 10 people whose work I really like, and I like checked in with them and asked them how the pandemic was going, how it affected their practices. And one of them asked me something that I've never been asked before. And he was like, when was the last time you wrote for yourself? And I couldn't answer. Like, I didn't know. And as a kid, like, I wanted to be a writer because, like, I was an avid reader, like, best friends with all of the librarians at all of my schools, like, very, very much a bookworm. And I would start writing just to like express myself, and it was always very, very fun and just like an extension of myself. And I think somewhere along the way I just ran out of time to do that kind of writing. I find that like once I'm done like my work that like pays for my bills in my life, I'm like, I want to turn my brain off. Like I'm so physically and mentally exhausted that I'm like, oh, like even if I want to write for myself, when would I do it? I need to clothe myself. So I'm still trying to figure out like when, like how. I don't know.
Yeah. I think as Mo mentioned too, like the timings in the day, like in the day, but also like duration. Like for me, it's like a morning thing because I know that as soon as I get to work, I'm just gonna be in that until the end of the evening, and then at nighttime I'm like, so. But I don't know. It's a ongoing.
Have you ever heard of morning pages? Yeah. So every morning, like one of the first things you do, like when you get your drink, like your coffee or your breakfast, you sit down and you just do every day do like like I think it's 1 to 3 pages, but like I can never fill that much, so I usually just do 1. But like start your day that way so you can like get it all out, and you just keep that journal for that specific reason, and that also becomes just for you too. So it's kind of like routine. It's hard to, again, it takes time, but I like that morning routine is helpful for me too. Cause like you said, once I get into that work mode, I'm like, I can't, nothing else. Yeah.
I love that. Maybe it will make me a morning person if I try to do that. Like,
or afternoon pages.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll wake up 10 minutes before my morning meeting and like roll out of bed and be like, hello everyone, I'm here. But I feel like my brain comes alive after dark. Like there was that period from like 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. where I feel brain dead. And then I'm like, oh my God, ideas are spilling out of me. And you know, like I remember watching a Toni Morrison documentary where she said after noon, she's an idiot. She's like, I'm stupid. I can't write a single good sentence. So she would wake up at 6 a.m. and like wrote all of her books between like 6 a.m. and noon. And I was like, I feel like I have the opposite problem. Like, I can't write before it's dark. Like anything I write in the daylight hours, I want to edit it all. I want to burn it. It's so bad. And then if I write something when I feel like the moon is out and the rest of the world is asleep, that's the kind of work that I find is my best.
I'm like that too. It's like 11 p.m. hits and I'm like, let's go. But also I think, so this only happens sometimes because you need to have like people you trust with your writing. I'm very like lucky to have a couple of friends who are writers, but sometimes during our pandemic, we would just like go on Discord and like mute it, but like you would know that everyone was there and it's like, just work on whatever you can for an hour. And then we would kind of do a share if people wanted to. And I found that helped me when I couldn't write anything for myself. So maybe creating spaces like that with your Ripe crew might be helpful for that. That's just something that we did sometimes during the pandemic, but we were not consistent.
Nice. I've been doing like park painting with my friends where we bring canvas to like Riverdale Park and just like go to town and just like talk and create like the most random stuff. And it's so like, it's so good for my brain. And I don't paint. Like I'm not good at painting, but it's good to do something that I feel like I have zero skill in.
Yay, I love all of this so much.
I'm sorry, I have a nosy question. I want to know everyone's big three signs. Like sun, rising, and moon. If you feel comfortable sharing. I
do. Gemini, Cancer, Cancer.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh
Like, where's the balance? I mean, there is balance in the chaos, but I mean, like, I'm an emotional mess 90% of the time.
Yay.
Libra sun, Gemini rising, Leo moon. So it's just like, also a mess, but like opposites of the mess spectrum.
Love this.
I'm a Pisces sun, Libra moon, Taurus rising, so I'm like a hopeless romantic forever. And just very, very much like I live in a daydream palace, like not really tethered to reality most of the time.
I love
Me
it.
too.
I don't know all three. I'm a Sagittarius, and I think rising is Virgo, or I think it's Virgo. I don't know a lot about this. I have an app that I look at occasionally to reinforce my feelings of the day. But I told my wife my sister is like an amateur astrologer and does like birth charts and things like that. So she will often tell me about like what's up or like what's going on when I'm like anyway. But I told my wife what my signs were at some point, and she was like very shocked. I'm like, I think it was the Virgo part, but anyways, I don't know.
I love it. I could see you referring to your phone being like, wait, what am I? In the background. Oh man, I'm double Gemini. I'm Gemini Sun, Moon, and Taurus rising, which keeps me on the ground because if not, I'm up there, not here. Yes, we should make a collab zodiac zine. I love that question. Never nosy.
Okay, good.
All right, so it is 4 p.m. I love everything that everybody just shared. I think that like kind of starting to conclude or beginning to conclude this conversation on that note makes sense. But I do see that there are still a couple of people listening. So if there's any questions that anybody has for any of the panelists, for Kelsey or Jesjit, for Mo or for Cleo, or if you have questions about Xpace, this is the time. You feel free to, honestly, we're a small group, so feel free to just unmute yourself and ask it, or you can also put in the chat. Yes.
Hi. Thank you all. This has been really, really interesting and informative. I appreciate all of your time and hearing about your projects. I have a question. I'd love Kelsey to answer it because you addressed it specifically, but I think it was looming in the background of a lot of people's kind of projects, but about funding. You've mentioned how important it is for you to pay your contributors, and you kind of have this, you have a publication that comes out like a couple times a year, I think. So I was just wondering, how do you, is it grants? Do you seek out private funding? Do you guys fundraise, or how do you keep everything moving?
So our issues are annual, which is helpful because it means we have more time to like get money. In the past, we've done Kickstarters. We've found, like with our system, we do pre-orders well in advance of when we're actually going to print. And most of the time, our pre-orders cover the cost of printing and more. They typically cover printing and paying all of our contributors. So going, like, that's just like been our business model. There's never anything left over to like pay ourselves or to kind of fund the next issue. So it kind of is like a cycle that repeats over and over again. But it's been sustainable enough so far. I was recently connected with some people who, I can give you my email actually, because I was given these resources for a bunch of grants that people, specifically related to like publishing print media, that, I mean, the money was like decent, and I'm not really looking into any of them, but I'd love to share them with anyone who would like to know more about them.
That's really, really great. Thanks so much. I will be contacting about that.
Thank you. Such a good question. Thank you, Kelsey. I'm going to reach out too, because I just had a friend who asked me about this and I was racking my brain. So really, really helpful info to have.
I would also love that information.
Yeah. Me too.
Information. I have a question. Dallas also wants it in the chat. They're saying, hi, Dallas. I have a question here in the chat from Bonnie. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they're asking a question about resources. Do you want me to read it out, or would you like to ask out loud? Okay. So yes, of course. Yes, I feel that. That's totally fair. So they're asking for somebody who wants to make more zines. The one of their stumbling blocks that they experience right now is knowing where to photocopy or print for cheap, even if it's just in black and white. Does anyone here have like tips or advice on like more affordable like print photocopy places, or just in general?
I have a little note. I've been printing with Nexus down in the West End. They did our zines, and we only do a small limited run, but it's like cheaper than going to, I don't know, what, Staples or something like that. I don't know. And they're like a family owned. But again, like I'm not like an expert in printing. Like I just do basic like things. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I was just trying to grab the link. So for OGP, the print run that we did this year, our interiors were printed with Omazi, and they are like a black run print shop in Toronto, and their prices were like really good. They were really great to work with, so I would recommend them, and I dropped their link in the chat. But sometimes, yeah, the Toronto Public Library is a really good place to print things. Sometimes like your convenience store might have like a copy print thing where you can just like photocopy a piece of paper and make scenes the good old fashioned way. But yeah, those are some other good resources. And if you want like a riso zine, like color code is right there, and there's VidePress as well. Toronto is really pretty good for having a bunch of places you can get good prints from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I second the Toronto Public Library as well. And they have access to like scanners and stuff too, so you can bring in material. Mm-hmm. Sweet. Thank you for your questions. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to ask? Oh, Micha, thank you so much for joining. All right, so I think we can wrap it up. 4:15. Let's use these extra 45 minutes that we didn't account for to do nothing time in between projects. No jumping into the next thing. The first exercise. But thank you again so much, Kelsey, Jesjit, Mo, and Cleo, for all of your insight, for your thoughts, for sharing everything. So lovely to have a deeper conversation with all of you. I'm just very full right now. I feel very full. And thank you everybody for tuning in and for listening and for engaging and asking questions. I'll be sending the recording over in the next couple of weeks or so, along with the resources on printing. So yeah, that's it. I just dropped my pen.
Thank you for being our lovely and beautiful moderator, Alexia.
Yes, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. All right.
This is so good. I love you all.
Yay, so much love. All right. Thank you so much. I will end the meeting now. Ciao.
Bye, everybody.